Hi, everybody. We have about a minute left. If you haven't, go ahead and put your email into the address or the chat box, your email address into the chat box, and we'll get started at 1. We're going to be a small group, but we knew that being that a majority of the schools are starting. Okay, it's 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Gotta get everybody out of the way here. Okay, so just some housekeeping things. Make sure that you have typed in your chat box to receive the training certificate by email. Both last week's and this week's will be mailed out next week in email. If you had participated in both, you get a certificate for both. Use the chat box to ask questions. End your question with a check mark, a question mark. Turn your video and camera on so we can see you guys. If you don't want to or you don't have that capability, that's fine. Mute your microphone during the presentation, and the presentation will be recorded and uploaded onto the NDE training website. And just a quick note on that, Jenna is our only office assistant at this time, and she's juggling lots of things. Plus, we just found out that now we have to do closed captioning on the videos, so it takes a lot longer to get it uploaded. So hopefully we'll get that up in the next couple weeks. But I wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, so for the agenda today, we're going to do a quick review, but first we're going to talk about safety data sheets. Then a quick review, standard operating procedures, critical control points, monitoring, corrective action, food safety training, and case studies. You'll be breaking out into the chat rooms to do the case studies, and there's no special instructions other than I hope you printed them off. If not, I have a screen or a slide on that, and we can always put it into the chat box. So hopefully somebody in your group has it. I just told you, you'll be in there for about 15 minutes to do the case study, and we'll review when you come back. Your group does not have to talk if they don't want to, but if you would like to talk about the case studies, you may mute yourself and talk about them. And I'll remind you when we get to the breakout rooms. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about are data safety sheets. They used to be called material data safety sheets, and that is a sheet that tells you everything there is to know about the chemicals that you use in your kitchen. You are required by OSHA to have the data safety sheets for every chemical in your kitchen that you use. Usually they come in, if you buy the whole case, they come in with that. But if you don't buy it by the case, all the bottles and the chemicals are required to have the 800 number for you to obtain those. They're easy to get. Excuse me. Make sure that you read your data safety sheets. The directions are intended use and if you may mix the chemicals with anything else. For instance, most disinfectants are not necessarily safe in the food service area unless you rinse them down. So that is a requirement. But make sure that you check your disinfectant for that information. Never mix two chemicals together. Oh, I didn't even finish that. Together unless the data safety sheet tells you that it is okay. But for instance, never combine soap and bleach together. It creates a toxic poison. Excuse me. So make sure that you read your data safety sheets so that you have the directions and the intended use for the chemical you're using and the food, not the food safety, but the first aid information on there. It needs to be stored in a location that you have quick and ready access. And OSHA does not want it to be on the internet for you to download, because if your internet has been compromised, like Iowa and Illinois were this past week because of the storms, and something happens, you may not be able to start first aid. And that is always critical. A lot of people will put their data safety sheets notebook in bright colors, and they put it in the dish room where the most chemicals are used. Okay.
You have
Yeah.
a question about the safety sheet. Where do they find this?
Where can they what?
Where do they get the data safety sheet?
Okay, so there is an 800 number. It is a requirement that all chemical companies have an 800 number that you can call and request it, or they might have the the internet address to get it. But a lot of times, if you're buying the chemical by the case, it's in the case of chemical. They are required to have that information readily available. Any other questions?
I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to do a quick review of what we talked about last week. We talked about HACCP, and it's just identified significant biological, chemical, or physical hazards at specific points within a product's flow from the time of purchase to when it is served. Often identified, the hazards can be prevented, eliminated, and reduced to safe levels. Gotta take my mask off. Sorry. Poor Jenna is gonna have to stay with me here. The flow of the food is the path that the food takes through your operation. So from the time you purchase it, it's delivered until the time you serve it. Okay, we're going to talk about standard operating procedures and the SOPs, because we abbreviate everything, but it's easier than saying standard operating procedures every single time. So the SOPs, when you're writing, are written instructions for the things done on a regular basis to ensure that your customer receives safe food. Must be included in your plan and may be changed to fit your kitchen, because not every kitchen is the same. We have some kitchens that are fixing thousands of meals a day, and we have other kitchens that are serving 10 to 15. So from large to small. So you have different equipment and different needs. Staff must be trained on the appropriate SOPs for their job. So for instance, You might have someone that just wants to do dishes and that's it. That's going to be me when I retire. Going to go into the dish room and that's all I'm going to do. And they wouldn't have to know all of the cooking temperatures. So if somebody in your kitchen never cooks, they don't need to know the cooking temperatures. But if most of our employees are multi-trained so that they are can do almost any position, because most of us are smaller kitchens. You need to modify the SOPs again to fit your kitchen. That is a necessity. Some examples of the HACCP are hand washing, personal hygiene, cooking, TCS foods, which is time and temperature control for safety foods, cooling the TCS foods, cleaning and sanitizing. We have COVID-19 SOPs. We created those when we first started this March. Bodily fluid cleanup, beef to school processing. We have around 33 and we have 15 more that we are working on. They are all located under HACCP on our website. And if you don't see a SOP on that you're needing on our website, please let me know. Now, on the SOPs, they're going to have a description of what the SOP is for, why you're writing it, or why it's written. It's going to have the information that you need. The bulk of it's going to be the procedures that you need to follow to keep the food safe. For instance, in cooking the TCS foods, I think I had a slide. Oh, sorry, it's almost poll time. In cooking the TCS foods, ground beef, for example, if it is raw, needs to be cooked to 155 for 17 seconds. I almost said 15, but it has changed to 17 seconds. Now, they've changed that due to research showing that it takes an extra couple of seconds to kill all the bacteria in the ground beef and to make a good kill. And that is what we want. We want to either reduce, eliminate the issues in the microorganisms in the food. And then in the SOP, we will have monitoring, and everybody knows what the monitoring for most of the things are your temperature locks. It could be your sanitizer concentration. It could be your dish machine temperature, or if it's a sanitizing dish machine, it would be this sanitizer level in that. Okay, we have a polling question now. And it's going to be popping up here in a little bit. And it's, can you modify an SOP to fit your kitchen? Yes or no? Let's see if I can talk with this off. Is everybody done?
About halfway.
Okay, about half of way there. Give you a couple more minutes.
It's kind of stopped.
I wonder if people are not listening. Go ahead. Okay, so it's done. And The majority of you answered yes, and you may change the SOPs at any time to fit your kitchen. Also, you may need to change them because that the food code has changed. And this does happen, and it happens when there are scientific information, research that has been done or comes to light from food-borne illnesses, and they track all of the foodborne illnesses that are reported, and they take the data from that to see how the food was infected, and then they come up with new procedures. Good job, everyone. Okay, so we're going to look at some critical control points. And the critical control points are how we can reduce, eliminate, or prevent foodborne illnesses. So we're looking, what can we do as the food arrives in your door? So if you're bringing in ground beef, you need to decide whether you're going to be purchasing it raw or pre-cooked. And you look at your staff and decide what best way to bring it in. If you're bringing it in raw, then you're going to decide whether you're going to receive it. If you're going to bring it in uncooked, you're going to decide whether it's raw or if you're bringing it in frozen. If it's frozen, it's going to go directly into either the refrigerator if you're going to use it right away, or it's going into the freezer. If it's frozen, you're going to make sure that the food, the ground beef, is at 32 degrees or below, and it is hard to the touch. You don't have to touch every ground beef patty or ground beef tube, but the majority, so that you know that the case is hasn't thawed and refrozen or thawed. And then, gotta take this off, I can't talk with it. And then we're going to put it, if it's going to be used right away, you can put it in the refrigerator on the bottom shelf in a pan to catch any of the purge, so that it's not dripping over any other food or onto the floor. And then you're going to watch how it's handled once it is in the kitchen. How long is it in the temperature danger zone before it's either cooked or put back into the refrigeration? Once it's cooked, you're going to take it to 155 for 17 seconds. And then you're going to put it into either warm holding, or you're going to be able to serve it right away. And if it's in the hot holding, then you're going to make sure that you check the temperature once every 2 hours. And if it's not the temperature, you will either reheat it or serve it as soon as possible within the 2 hours. And these are the control steps. It's the last control at this point that may result in an unacceptable health risk. So we don't want to lose control, because that's when things happen. I've seen people, when they're patting the hamburgers or they're dealing with the raw beef and they've got gloves on and they forget to take their gloves off and they go touch something else and contaminates it. It's kind of like the horror stories that of cooks being dealing with the raw chicken and then chopping the lettuce for the lunch meal. So we don't want those to happen. So that's why we have these standards in place. You have to decide which control measures are absolutely essential to ensuring the safety of food for foods in each process. Ensure that your staff applies these control measures in at each critical control point. You're going to record your control measures for each process in your plan, and it is a preventive rather than a reactive way to combat the microorganisms. This is a much better way than the reactive. It was nice when people started using the HACCP plan instead of reacting to the foodborne illnesses. We now have ways to prevent them, and they keep doing research to keep us safe and keep our customers safe. Communicate and train your staff on critical control points. This is essential. So here I have some examples of critical limits to include in your SOPs, which most of these are, except we are working on the cooking of the TCS foods because we need to change the ground beef from 155 for 15 seconds to 155 for 17 seconds. And that is for any ground product that's containing beef, pork, fish, cube, or Salisbury steaks. It does not include poultry. Poultry is always cooked to 165 for 15 seconds. So a critical limit for fruits and vegetables that you're going to hot hold, you're going to cook them to 135 for 15 seconds. And this also includes any commercially pre-cooked items such as turkey and ham slices, if you use chicken slices for sandwiches. But check your label for your manufacturer's recommendation for any of your pre-cooked items. Hand washing. The critical control limits are washing your hands vigorously for a minimum of 20 seconds. So each SOP has critical limits that suit that SOP. Polling question number 2. Be just a minute and you'll see your question. I should be looking, make sure. Polling question. Okay, there it goes. Okay, you should see it. If you don't, let me know.
Beth, we have a couple of questions if you want to address them now.
That would be great.
Okay, so here we go. What temperature does it have to be held at for those 2 hours?
That's a great question, and that is 135. It just has to be out of the temperature danger zone for hot holding, and then cold holding is 41 degrees or lower.
Okay, so next question. Do you need a separate SOP for each meat?
No, you don't need a separate SOP for each meat. We have one that is TCS Foods cooking temperature, and it addresses all of the cooking temperatures for the fruits, from the fruits and vegetables at 135 to the roast, beef roast, pork roast, your whole fish at 145. The 155 for 17 seconds is all your ground meats except for poultry, and poultry is at 165 for 15 seconds. And that does include stuffed. If you're stuffing like manicotti, or you're stuffing a shell, or you're doing the thick lasagna, if you're stuffing pork, most of us wouldn't do stuffed pork unless it was a special occasion, or stuffed beef. But those things have to go to 165, and we have the cooking TCS Foods SOP on our website.
Okay, so then there's a question, will you have these CCP temps on a printer that I can post in my kitchen? Would that be that SOP you just mentioned?
Yes, that's part of the SOP, so we will get that posted as soon as we can. It might take a while because if you're like me, I'm having a terrible time. I've known ground beef to be cooked to 155 for 15 seconds for probably 20 years. So it's hard to say 15 or 17 seconds. See, I can't even do it. Unless I look at it, it's hard to remember. So those job aids are wonderful for helping to remember those things. Okay, are we closed? Okay, we are closed. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but the majority of you, great job cooking the ground beef to 155 for 17 seconds. And I did put that on here, the polling, because it's hard to remember because you haven't done it for a long time. So that's why this one is there. Okay, so now we'll go to the next slide. And we're going to talk about monitoring. Now, monitoring isn't really different from what you already do. Some are done weekly, some are done daily, some are monthly, and some are as needed. Temperature logs, we do daily. So you're taking the temperature logs of your refrigeration, your freezers, your cooking temperatures, your cold holding foods, and make sure that they're at 41 degrees or lower so that when the health department comes, they don't get you for that. Plus, it's keeping those kids safe. And the milk coolers, making sure that the milk is cold. There are lots of reasons. We don't want the milk to spoil. If it's kept at 41 degrees or lower, it lasts longer. And it just tastes better when it's cold. Although I do know people that like warm milk, I just don't get it. And if it is over 50 degrees, you do have to get rid of it. So you want to make sure that your products are cold and good for our kids. Sanitizing logs. Many people forget that they need to do sanitizing logs, and those are done on an as-need basis. Anytime you change your sanitizer water, you need to make sure that it is within the recommended parts per million for the sanitizer. And that is going to come off the directions or your data safety sheets for the chemicals. Calibrating your thermometers. You have a log for that. Rule of thumb is each shift, but if you drop it and you've got the old bimetallic stem thermometers, you need to recalibrate it. If you have the digital, those are easier. You push the reset when it's in the ice bath. And I only recommend the ice bath for calibrating thermometers because I have experienced two people pouring the water on themselves because they were talking to someone and not paying attention to what they were doing. And it's a painful experience. Receiving logs, checking in to make sure that your delivery, the frozen items are frozen, the cold items are all below 41 degrees. Your damage and discard log. Now that you're not going to use as much, hopefully, because those would be damaged items that either have been accepted and maybe somebody drops a can, or maybe something happens or there's a recall. Maybe your freezer went out over the summer and you walked in and you have all of the food in the freezer that has been at 50 degrees or higher all for who knows how long. But if it's at 50, it's over the 41 and you don't know how long it's been there and temping it at 50 or above 41, you're going to throw it out. And hopefully your custodian doesn't come in and see that it's out and then fix it and not tell you, because then you can have other issues. So you need to communicate with your custodians not to do that. If there's something that's wrong, they can turn it on, but they need to know, let you know so that you can address it. But you don't want them to turn it on until you get there. Master cleaning lists. Now this is something that a lot of us don't have and we don't use because it's in everybody's head. And that's great that it's in everybody's heads, but what about the new people? It's easier to train with job aids than it is to have somebody have to pick a brain of who's ever got the master cleaning list or that position. And what happens if that position just quits before the new person comes on, which is what generally happens. And then, of course, our great food safety checklist. Now, when HACCP first came out, they made us do this weekly, but it is a monthly, and this is a great learning tool for everyone to do. It doesn't have to be the manager. The manager will need to sign off on it, but every employee can do any of these logs with the monitoring by the food service manager or director, because it's a great way to learn food safety and it keeps you on your toes. And by different people doing them, they might catch other things as you're doing those checklists.
Beth,
Okay.
a couple more questions.
Okay,
We have a lively group here today. This
I
is great.
know. This is great.
Do we need to log sanitizer water each time we change it? That will be several times a day.
Yes, and unless you have come up with a recipe that is standardized so that you know that if you put maybe a tablespoon of your chemical, I'm just saying that off the top of my head, don't quote me on that, and it goes into maybe 2 quarts of water. Whatever your label and direction says or the data safety sheet says to do, and you've got a consistent report, you only need to do it once a day. But otherwise, if you don't have that recipe down, you need to test it until you've got a recipe down. But you have to test it at least once a day. And if it looks like that the product or the sanitizer water has been sitting there for a long time and you want to see how long it stays, so you can test it then to see how long it stays, but it is recommended that you do it every time unless you have a standardized recipe that consistently is in the correct parts per million. And the
Okay.
data safety sheet will tell you. Okay,
Sorry about that.
that's all right.
Next question, for the receiving log, do we need to temp every frozen and or refrigerated item, or can we do several as a representative sample?
That is awesome. You can do several as a representative. And on the frozen ones, you want to look at the frozen products and see if you think anything may have been thawed and refrozen. Maybe the box looks like it had been wet and then dried, or maybe you see a little puddle of liquid somewhere on the box, like maybe it's fresh. So those are signs to look, but you can do a random sampling. Depending on your load, how much you're bringing in is on how many you're going to choose. The more items you have, the more random samples you should have. And the same with the cold products. Think of your TCS foods that are higher at risk. Then like your milk is not necessarily, it's a high risk, but it's not as high risk as your ground beef. But you want your milk to come in under And I'm going to tell you, milk can come in under 45 degrees. Although we like it to come in at 41 because it's going to keep longer in your little refrigerators.
Okay, next question. What if it is a system hooked up to our water supply?
Okay, so you'll need to test it, your sanitizer, because it's supposed to be distributing at the correct parts per million. So but you do need to verify that. And once a day would probably be enough, but if it looks like you need to change your container of sanitizer, and right when you start, sometimes it's either too strong or it is too weak. So just look at that.
Okay, and then I'm looking here on our website. Someone asked if we have a sample log sheet for our sanitizer, or should we come up with our own? I don't see one on our homepage.
That is one of the ones that is in works, because we are we're working on it. I was changing a couple of things so that it is up to date. It's amazing how things get out of date when you haven't touched them since 2005.
Yeah. Righty, I think that is it for now.
Okay, perfect. You guys are asking great questions. Okay, so on the monitoring procedures, the director, manager, supervisor, whatever your title is, you train the staff on the critical control points, how to monitor the critical control points, and to properly fill out the logs. You will assign the food service staff to monitoring, because it doesn't make sense to have somebody that is either doing the salad bar, or maybe they do the salad bar and the dish machine, to run over and check the temperatures. The only reason I say that is because that has happened in the past, and the reason made sense. That person loved to take temperatures, so they let her take all the temperatures. So if that happens, that's fine, but especially if you're in a larger and you're short-staffed or whatever, make sure that it's the quick and easy food service staff that's doing the monitoring. And you will also be responsible for monitoring the overall performance of the standard operating procedures. So that means that at the beginning of the school year, you can divide the SOPs up between your staff and everybody can review them, but you are the one that's ultimately responsible for signing off on the monitoring to make sure that they are up to date. Okay, I keep on. The food service manager director will be the one that does the corrective actions and help with them. They're not always going to do the corrective actions, but they will decide how much detail you need to provide in the list of corrective actions. You're going to decide how to communicate the procedure to the staff so that they can tell you in return. And you're going to determine the amount of documentation to keep on the corrective actions taken. Now, maybe you're cooking the ground beef from scratch, and some of it accidentally, you temp several of the ground beef patties, and you don't have to do all of them, but you do have to randomly test them throughout the pan, just like you take the temperatures in several places. And then if something happens, like maybe one of the ground beef patties came back and it was pink, and the student was upset over that, then you're going to have to figure out, have in place what those corrective actions are, so that doesn't happen again. Maybe you have a hot spot in your oven, and the other ones, the ones you tested were fine, but the ones in another area were not, they were still a little underdone. So you would work on those. Okay. You also review and update all corrective action at least annually. And then you provide training on the critical control points and the corrective actions. Okay, the review of HACCP food safety system and plan. You're going to review it and revise your plan at least annually. Some of the SOPs you won't change. Other ones you will change. It just depends on what has happened. The only thing that I know right now that has changed in the food code is the ground beef for 17 seconds on the ground meats. But other than that, the food code for Nebraska has not been posted, but we did say that we would change the ground beef and the ground meats to 17 seconds, 155 for 17 seconds, so that we get used to it before it goes into into the food code. And we're hoping that it does go in soon. And then you're going to determine who will review the current plan, when it will be done, and how it will be documented. And on each of the SOPs, there is a sign-in sheet where you can sign it and date it. And you can continue through the page and and just replace it when it is full and start over. Okay, by reviewing your HACCP plan, you'll continuously, by observing your staff's action, reviewing records, and discussing the plan with the staff. Maybe you noticed somebody was going over to wash their hands and you guys were really busy, and so they didn't take the full 20 seconds to wash their hands. They just kind of got a little bit of soap and rubbed the tip of their fingers under. Then you could make a mental note of that and then discuss the plan with the staff so that they are aware. And that happens more often, unfortunately, than what we want to admit. You probably already do this. So some of the things that you need to think about is, do I need new thermometers? Do I need new cutting boards? What shape are the cutting boards in? The plastic ones do last a long time, but once they start to get marked up or stained, or they have black stains of mold on them, we want to replace them. Do you have the dish machine temperature strips? Do you have sanitizer buckets or the sanitizer strips? Are your buckets for the sanitizer marked clearly so that everyone knows that the water in or the mixture in the sanitizer bucket is sanitizer? When they're not marked, not everybody will know that. Are the thermometers stored in the correct place? Easy access. Does each cook have a thermometer, or each salad person have a thermometer? Are the HACCP logs being completed on time and correctly? Have you noticed that maybe someone's not taking the refrigerator temps in the morning, or the freezer temps? Maybe they're missing a refrigerator because they didn't know that it was in the concession stand area that you have access to. Maybe it's hidden, who knows? Sometimes the freezer is back in the custodial area because they have more storeroom than you do. So just make sure that all the logs are being used and that each of your refrigerations and all the logs that you need to use are used. Now, if you are a satellite school, which means that you're receiving food from another school, then you may not need to have the cooking temperature SOPs, or think about what you need for doing the prep work. You just need to have a thermometer to check the food in with, and you need the sanitizer buckets and hand washing. So your SOPs and your HACCP plan will look different from those that are full kitchens. And if you ever need assistance on what you need for a satellite, please let us know. Polling question number 3. Okay, how often do you need to review standard operating procedures? Donna, are there any questions?
Why, what a coinky dink you should ask. Okay, here's one. Do low temperature dish machines need to be tested since there is sanitizing rinse at the end of the final cycle? If so, what is the temperature range?
And that will come from your dish machine's handbook. You're going to look to see what it is recommended by the manufacturer. And you do need to run sanitizer strip that you can get and put on a plate to make sure that it is sanitizing at the correct parts per million.
And that's it.
Well, awesome. You guys are great. One other thing I want to say about satellites is that you do need to do your own HACCP plan because it has to be tailored to your kitchen and what equipment you have in there. If you don't have any equipment, you just have the hot wells. It's pretty simple, but you have to do the description of your kitchen and tell them all about what you do, how much enrollment, how many grades, your address, number of employees, if you have volunteers, all of those required parts for your description. Okay, we're almost done polling. Got a few more people there. There it goes. Very good. You guys did awesome. And it is annually that you must review your standard operating procedures. Okay. Oh, now we're going to the breakout rooms. And we're going to be in breakout rooms, remember. You can pick one of the cases to start with. If you have time, go ahead and discuss all of them, but if you don't worry about it. I will be sending out the total answers. We'll go over them, but I'll send it out with your certificates next week. So you'll have the case studies and the answers if you would like to use them for training down the road. You'll have 15 minutes to talk about the HACCP case studies in the breakout room. And remember, we don't need a lead, just whoever wants to talk when you come back, that is fine. So you'll be going to breakout rooms here. See you in 15 minutes. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Nope, not yet. You are muted.
Yeah, mute that.
Okay, people will be coming back. You're muted. Are we still on you? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks.
Beth, we have one more question too before we get going again.
Okay,
It was in regards to the dishwasher conversation. Do we trust the digital temperature gauge on the dishwasher to be correct?
no. You have to use the test strips to run through. You can get the ones that are just little or they have a little not elastic. They stick to the tray, and you can run them through the dish machine with that on there. It'll tell the time. Just because sometimes the temperature gauges get off calibration, so you want to make sure that they are calibrated right. So you need to be checking those too.
That's all. Thank you. Oh,
Mhm.
where do you get the strips? Did you mention that?
No, I didn't mention that.
Okay.
And if you Google dish machines temperature strips, you will find an amazing amount of them. Yes, Dorothy is holding it up. Dorothy Payfield is holding one up. So if you guys search for Dorothy, there's all kinds of the strips. It's test strips, and there's T test strips. So there's lots of them out there. There's all kinds. And no, we cannot say which one is better than the others. It has to be fair and competitive. Okay, everybody is back, right? Yes, okay, everybody's back. So we're gonna go over the first case study. And that's the food service purchased an infrared thermometer and ask you to check the surface temperature of the frozen meat products when they are received from the vendor. Today, the vendor delivered several boxes of hamburger patties. You opened one box to take the temperature. The temperature ranged from 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 35 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the location of the box and the patties in the box. What corrective action would you take? Am I sharing? Can you guys see it? My screen?
No.
Okay, sorry. I share. Up top, it does. I got it. Okay. Technical difficulty. Why do I have a big, Now can you see it?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Okay, sorry. So, does anybody want to talk about what they would do? If you don't, I'll just go over some things. Any takers? Okay. There are several steps that you could be taken. You could open another box of the patties and check several temps. Report the situation to your food service manager, director, supervisor. That person may take the following corrective actions. Reject the delivery. You can accept the delivery if the patties are determined to be solid to the touch because despite the temperature, if it's solid, it means that it hasn't thawed and thawed yet. But if it's starting to get a little where you get an indentation in it, that means that it is in the process of thawing. You could accept the patty if the delivery if the patties are going to be used within the next 1 to 2 days and can be stored in the refrigerator. You can accept the delivery, but contact the food distributor to let them know that the temperature standards are not being met. And the last one, you definitely need to let them know that if the patties are not solid and they have the temperature of 32 degrees to 35 degrees. Okay. The next case study. You come to work on Tuesday morning and take temperatures of the refrigerators. One of the milk coolers is at 50 degrees. What corrective action do you take? Any takers?
I said this actually happened to me and I threw the milk out.
That is great. Yes, that is exactly. You do need to check randomly check the temperatures to make sure that maybe you have a hot spot in your refrigerator. You know, the area to the front where the doors latch sometimes are warmer than those in the back. So maybe it's only the front part. If the other ones are at least 41 degrees, then those are okay. It's just the ones that are testing 50, and you would discard those. Very, very good, Dorothy. And of course, you're going to report that to your food service manager, director, or yourself. And then you're going to contact the distributor or the delivery company to let them know you would prefer to have the milk received at 35 degrees for expanded shelf life. And if that is their equipment, you're going to ask them to replace it, telling them, or fix it, telling them that it is, depending on what your contract says too, so that you don't have that issue again. Because sometimes if they bring it in and it's 45 degrees and then they put it in there, sometimes it doesn't cool down and then you have some issues. Okay, our next case study. You're setting up the line for the first group of students. You take the temperature of all the food on the line and find that the fajita chicken meat is at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 125 degrees Fahrenheit, and 130 degrees Fahrenheit in the various spots in the pan on the serving line. What corrective actions would you take? Any ideas?
Put it back in and heat it up to 165.
Very good, yes. And then check your temperatures of your holding equipment. If you had it in the oven and you only had it at at 150, maybe your low temperature is not working. So you need to be checking the temperature of your ovens. If you have a holding piece of equipment, holding cabinet, you need to check to make sure that your holding cabinet was turned on in time, is holding the correct temperature, and then if it needs to be fixed, you'll need to do that by letting your food service manager, director, supervisor know so that they can handle the procedure correctly. So very good. I hope you enjoyed doing those and working with each other. Donna, are there any questions? Or Allie, who's ever doing them?
I don't see any new ones.
Awesome. Donna, do you want to talk about the Launch Nebraska new updated guidance that we put out there?
Sure. I'm sorry, but the city tree guy was just here looking at a tree yesterday, and now there's a truck out there cutting branches off. That never happened so quickly. Okay,
I'm
anyway.
amazed.
Yeah, it is amazing. Yes, there is a new document. I talked about it on serving up great school meals yesterday on the Launch Nebraska site. And if you go to the Launch Nebraska homepage, you can scroll down and there's a document that is called Nebraska Considerations for Cafeterias and School Meals. Do you want me to share my screen and show that, or
Yes, that would be awesome.
Okay, let me see if I can do that because, well, I believe I can. And it's over here, so I will go grab it. And pull it over here. All righty. There you go. So this is the document that we're talking about, and this is the document that is color-coded according to the 4 different risk levels. Allie and Beth mostly worked on this a lot, so
Donna, you might have the wrong document. You might have the food chart, the food temp chart up.
Yep.
oh, see, here we go, because I pulled it over from my other screen.
That's okay. Yeah.
There we go. Let's see what I can come up with here. This is always confusing when you, there we go. I have a whole bunch of stuff open here, don't I? Okay, so what do you see now?
Your Google launch.
My Google? Okay, well, it's showing it from this screen then. Okay, so we'll just go to Launch Nebraska, which we've been there several times. But again, here it is. And you scroll down and let's see, here it is right here at the top. Nebraska considerations for cafeterias and school meals. And you click on that and there you go. You have a document that is specifically for guidance that's specific to the risk levels, the 4 different risk levels, and they are color coded. You see first that green is minimal COVID activity, and then we go into the yellow, which is minimal to moderate. There is orange, which is coming up here, that is moderate, and then we have the red category, which is significant. So that gives you even more specific guidance to work through this as we go through this period of time that we're in. So it's good news that it is up and going, and I'm going to stop my sharing right now. There we go.
Okay.
You have one more question, Beth.
Okay.
This question is about bleach. If you're using bleach, does it have to be Clorox brand?
No, bleach can be any brand as long as it is not scented or the thick pour. It has to be original bleach, but it can be any kind of bleach. And again, we cannot say which bleach is better than the other, but I think bleach is bleach. Okay, go ahead, Allie.
There's no more in the chat, but if anybody would like to just ask one, go ahead too. You can certainly speak up. You don't have to type it in the box. Yep.
I want to clarify the temperature chart. We'll have a temperature chart for you that you can post. It won't be you posting the SOPs. We will be updating the SOPs, so you'll be able to get those. But we also will have a temperature chart that you can post. I wanted to clarify that. Any other questions?
Hey, Beth,
Uh-huh.
we're talking here, and what's the difference between germicidal Clorox and disinfectant Clorox?
I'm not sure. We will, I can,
Because
research-
I know you can buy different Cloroxes, and then there's that Clorox, and you gotta be careful that's just for clothes in the
Right.
stores. I mean, there's 3 different, there's different Cloroxes when you go in the store.
right. And you need the higher percentage, but you also can't get it too strong. Let me, I'll research that because I think one of them is used for hospitals.
Yeah. The germicidal I know is stronger, Beth, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure the details. I just know it is stronger.
Right.
Yep.
But
Yep.
and that might be what, if you're going to disinfect with bleach, you need to use, but I will find that out for sure, because I know that they don't want you to always use the germicidal unless you weaken the strength of it. So we will look into that for you. The germicidal. And bleach is fine for you to use for your sanitizing if that is what you want. You don't have to buy the quats. It's totally up to you. That's a school decision. They are equal according to the food code and to the food inspectors. They are equal in sanitizing. But for COVID, they may not be, so we will all investigate that for you. And you might have to get the germicidal, we will see. So, any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay,
Okay, now with COVID, is everyone wearing gloves with every single duty they're doing in the kitchen? Because there were times, you know, we didn't use them when we washed the dishes or, you know, certain things. Is it necessary to have them on for every cleaning, every chopping of blood? I mean, every single thing you do to wear gloves?
if anytime that it is ready to eat food, you have to do the
Yes.
gloves just like
Yes.
before.
Yes.
But the other ones, it is school decision and checking with your local health department.
Okay. About that.
We are recommending that you guys do use gloves just in case one of you would have COVID. It does cut down on the exposure to everyone else.
Yes, that's what I've told all the girls, you know, for
Yeah.
everything, because we were back today cleaning, you know, it's like
Right. So
Just
yeah,
changing them regularly from duty to duty and, okay,
yes. And we hope that we do not run out of gloves.
well, I know. US Foods didn't have any when I ordered this week.
So you might have to shop around
Yeah.
and find other vendors that have them.
And I'm kind of stocked up. We had the summer food service program, so I tried to get some every, you know, week. So we're good for a bit, but
Good.
it won't take long, you know.
Right, right. So, yes, and make sure that they're changing them. So, any other questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, you can always email me at beth.haas@nebraska.gov. And we'll end a little early today. And this will be recorded. Hopefully we will get it posted sometime in the next 2 weeks. And I'll get those SOPs and the temperature charts to you. I'll do a blast email on those so that everybody gets them. And if the new food code comes out, if they pass it before they're done, the state senators are done, we will get that to you in September, maybe October. But if it doesn't, it will be next year before we get it to you. So we will go from there. You guys all have a great day and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey.
Bye.
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 Bye. Oh, there's my leave. I still, oh, that's my Google. So how do I get out the?